So we're going to do like, this is kind of a little bit of a last minute addition to the schedule because we got a speaker cancellation. So we don't have any agenda. I just rounded up some add-on devs. We got Kevin up here, Robin from Ellis Lab. So if anybody just has anything they want to talk about add-on related, we can try to discuss it. Yeah. Yes. Otherwise, we can just break early.
One obviously out of nowhere, but I feel like there's seasons of time where it seems like if I just had a module that like connected to whatever the Salesforce variant is at that time, like where there'll be a potential time like, well, we're just good. And so I feel like those are things that every now and then it seems like, gosh, if there was something there, it would just be something nice to have. It'd be a nice answer to have to the prospect, because then they kind of lose their interest when there's not that fun.
It sounds like you need to finance the building of a add-on.
Oh, yes. Hey, let's make it a little more official. Here.
Hi, I'm Jace from EE Harbor. Most of you probably know me because I'm either in Slack or I've responded to your support requests.
Julian from Vector Media Group.
Brian Litzinger, Bold Minded.
TJ Draper, Buzzing Pixel.
I want to expand on that financing thing a little bit. So for an add-on dev, like I see a lot of people coming for very custom things sometimes, very specific integrations. And for a dev to just say, I'm just going to build this random thing, there's not much. It's really hard to get revenue from that to sell it because there's not many people out there that really need that. So like he just said, basically somebody needs to finance that by either paying for the full price up front. Sometimes a dev will say, I'll cut the price in half if the developer can keep the rights to resell it, kind of thing. So that's really kind of how you need to approach that. It's a custom application. Think of it as custom app, not an EE add-on at that point.
You were specifically talking about Salesforce, right?
Yeah, I think it was, it might have been Pardot at the moment happening, like, what is this?
Okay.
And it's just like, ironically, we got the client, we did the thing, and we didn't even like need the fancy plugin. I think it's more like, there's just a perception when I'm just like, oh, use the CMS, it's so easy. And I'm like, oh, did the word part out? And then it's just kind of like, even though in the end, like, they didn't need a fancy integration, I think it's just that's a perception when clients are trying to integrate with their business processes. And like, if I don't have the answer, that's just like, oh, okay.
Well, actually, related to Salesforce, Soulspace's Freeform does connect to Salesforce, and you can also write custom adapters, so something for Pardot, although Pardot does not make that easy. So there are other ways around it, though.
Oh crap, this one's really loud. In your case, I would probably just say, yes, it does work, and then figure it out later.
I think I kind of did that probably live.
So I'm a system administrator, a little bit of PHP, but I think I may have decided in the last 20 minutes to become an add-on developer in the last talk. Yeah, exactly. And all my ideas are going out on paper, and I'm going to be kind of imagining it, and what it'll do, and how it'll, save the world. But then the thought comes in, how do I make this so I make this get a revenue stream and it doesn't get stolen? And it's a very basic question about all software. Is there any conversations across the development community about best practices for keeping your plugin licensed but not being draconian and trying to encode it, which
Yeah, at one point we encoded EE and that was horrible.
I think Pixel and Tonic, back when they did add-ons, they basically just shrugged. Like, if it happens, it happens. I know some people have tried to do like license validation, like phoning home. Personally, what I do is every add-on support ticket pulls up a person's account so I can see past tickets and all the licenses that are currently valid. So nothing phones home, but if you're asking about something and I see you have no valid licenses, I'll be like, hey, you should probably update first. So it's a very social contract, I guess. And I've really had no issues with it. I don't know if anything's out there that's illegal. If it is, they haven't come to me for support, which is the main issue. So if somebody's using it illegally, I don't care. But if they come to me needing help for it, they're not going to get support. So.
Oh, I was just gonna say, the main thing to me,
That one's super
it's,
loud.
yeah, the thing needs to be turned down. The main thing for me is don't make your paying existing customers jump through hoops for the people who are gonna find a way to hack it anyway. I really hate it when software does that, and so I don't do that. But I actually do license validation, but I've also helped people get around it who had strange custom setups with various weird staging URLs. But you know, I do ping my Ansel will ping my web service like every day or every 24 hours whenever you get in the control panel or whatever. But it's really light stuff. But I would say definitely don't make it a pain for your existing users.
I do, actually. We had this conversation. Hello. We had this conversation this morning with somebody. It's also a balance between what you want to try to support, because you can go way out of your way trying to lock down your software, but then there's all that overhead of license validation, writing the code to make sure that everything is unique per site, having somebody on staff that's going to monitor that and maybe follow up with the individual people. So unless you have like a gross violation of your licenses and you just know for a fact that there's a ton out there, you have to make the decision as to whether it's worth the manpower or, and like I said, ease of use for your customers, because the person who pays for your license honorably but then has some edge case thing where they installed it on a dev server or a staging server and all of a sudden it gets locked down and can't be used is more bad blood than having 10 people who are maybe stealing it that aren't going to cost you as much.
Follow-up, a comment, then follow-up. Actually, both two questions. Would you say the community, us, the developers as a whole, is a little bit more teamwork approach and not likely to do that than, let's say, a WordPress environment? Like, is, a different animal between the EE developer?
I have never, ever done this. No, I'm kidding. So what tends to happen in the EE community, and I've run into this with my own add-ons, is somebody will have a base install. I have a base install, and it has certain add-ons that I know I'm going to use. And if you don't keep track of those and purchase them, what happens is you push a site out and you forgot to get the licenses. And I think that's something that happens accidentally in the community, and it's something that we can all kind of work better at and be aware of. That's where my mind went when you were asking that question. I don't know if that helps you at all. But as far as the actual people in the community, I've never had an issue with like rampant pirating or whatever.
Final question. How do you decide price?
I actually have an answer for the previous question.
Okay.
Yes. The WordPress ecosystem, I think, is more likely to have add-ons that are acquired licensely different than Expression Engine, because we don't have the self-installing third-party, adding. So the people that we are selling our add-ons to that are integrating it are more likely to be engineers and developers who have to do template tags and stuff like that than just like a one-click, I'm going to install this plugin, and it's super simple to do that on 100 sites without any sort of moral obligation to the community.
Pricing. Pick a number that feels good, then double it. Well, it's like, honestly, I have no mathematical rhyme or reason. I didn't try to I don't keep track of how much time I work on add-ons. So I'm not trying to meet an average hourly rate. I just gut feeling just based on what other people are charging. Like Publisher, I spent a few hundred hours on it, so that's why it's more expensive. Ones that take a few days to do might be cheaper, but then sometimes they might require more support. So you kind of got to balance or estimate how much support you might have from that.
I really recommend everybody try add-on development once, because before I became a PHP developer, I was just working in Expression Engine as a front-end guy, and I would think, man, these add-ons are so expensive. I'm not paying $80 for this thing. And now I'm on the other side of it. I'm like, $80 is not enough for what I'm building. And like like Brian said, like several hundred hours in an add-on that you might sell one a month at 70 or $80. It's, I wish everyone in the community would have the experience that I had of going, oh, that's why they charge that much for that add-on. Yeah.
What if you have developers and coworkers that are in this room that write developer modules and don't release them?
Do you want to support those add-ons forever? It's come down to support, to be honest. I mean, it's
How big a deal is it for?
that's more than 80% of the time. I mean, I answer support tickets almost every day. It could be something really quick and easy, but yeah, it's every day I'm paying attention to it. So somebody's got to be on top of it. If you let support tickets go for several days unanswered, you get unhappy customers.
Yeah, I mean, support is a big deal, and I am not planning on writing any more commercial add-ons at this time because of support. I actually have really good customers. I've only had one customer cuss me out in my entire career building add-ons, and I know Brian thinks that's crazy. I've talked to him about it, but it is a big deal though, because you do get like a lot of your work comes in with like maybe 5 or 10% of your customers supporting cases that you haven't thought of, or something that you thought you had solid and it turns out they had this way to break it, and you spend a lot of time on that. And it's so when releasing an add-on, you have to consider even a free, like I just did a free add-on that I said I wasn't going to release anymore, and here I am. But like I just did a free add-on, but even so, like there's a couple of open issues on GitHub right now that you have to go and look at and see what's going on if you want to maintain your status in the community and seeming like you're a responsive developer. Like that all factors in to whether you're going to release an add-on or not.
I think it's encouraging that you guys struggle with support though. Because we install modules you guys make and don't really think about it. Oh, this worked and move on. And maybe I have support requests, maybe I don't. But I would never think that you guys are struggling to keep up with support. Which means that people are.
It's not struggling to keep up with it. I mean, most people don't usually report a ticket. Sometimes I see one person's using something in a way that like he said, I never dreamed of it. And somehow this one person is stumbling upon 6 different things. It's how are you finding all these issues? So I'm grateful that they're finding it because I can fix it. But it's how did other people not run into this kind of thing?
Sorry,
So-
Brian.
Robin knows what
Well, my question is, how do you guys handle, some of you guys do base support, right? Oh, yeah, that's just the question. How do you guys handle support? You paid, and if so, what more? What is paid?
We do. So we have the Mega Pack Premier, which is all the add-ons, same as the regular Mega Pack, but it's just kind of a preferred support. Obviously, we're a little different than these guys because we acquired so many add-ons from other developers, and a lot of those had been abandoned for a long time. So we got a landslide of support that came with that. And honestly, you guys make my life difficult, and I totally appreciate it. Because independent, end user clients, they have questions that are fairly benign. How do I do this? You guys are using Ansel with an asset source and a block with stash, and I can spend 3-4 hours trying to debug something that helps one person. So we get a bunch of those types of emails in, and as a developer first, I'm intrigued by your problem. So I'm going to set up your site, I'm going to try to do all this stuff, and then, Tom walks by and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm helping this one thing. He's like, weren't you working on that yesterday? Yeah, but I got to figure it out. I got to fix this. It's got to work. So for our Premier support, it just brings those people kind of to the front of the line, and we do a little bit more in depth. If it's something that's going to take me 3 or 4 hours to figure out, and it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill problem that could be solved by the customer, we kind of push it back on them a little bit, just because if an issue with their templates, or like TJ was saying, engineering the wrong way, if you got channel entries nested, it might be something that we could do programmatically to be more performant or to fix. But for a Premier customer, we might log in, look at their templates, maybe help them restructure it a little bit differently, something we wouldn't normally do if just add-on support.
What's the predictable expectation you find that the customers have for turnaround on support issues in a paid environment, not a open source free?
It's all over.
Right, I'm not talking about my site's down, oh my gosh, I'm just looking at my everything's screwed. get it to max? Is it 24 hours? Is it?
I'll just answer, I'll speak loud. I would say it largely depends on the urgency of the situation. Some people are like, oh, this isn't going out for 6 months, like, they literally don't care. Other people are like, we're trying to push it live right now, and they're freaking out. So, as much as, as an add-on developer doing support, you don't want to hear that answer, but that is the reality, I think. It depends on, like, where people are.
Was it you, Jason, that pinged me? I think it was you. It was a couple months ago, or maybe earlier this year. You just pinged me on Slack and said, "Hey, we just pushed the site out live, and we're having this issue with Ansel." I think that was you. Was it you? Okay. Sorry. It was somebody in the Slack community, and they pinged me and said, "Really sorry to bother you. We pushed the site out live, and we're having this huge issue." And I'm going to respond to that like a lot quicker than a support ticket that comes in that is clearly not a top priority, and I was working on this thing and I don't want to derail myself. Yeah.
But if I can say something, like, all these add-on developers are super cool at doing stuff like that on Slack.
Yeah.
I think Jace gets sick of hearing from you every now and then. but it is, because they're working just like we are, and you get a good response from it. I've talked to listening around Slack and stuff too. And if it gets to, like if you're worried about bugging them too much, if it gets to the point to where they need to take it further, like, they'll let you know. Like JC's told me before, like, hey, this is going to take more time. Can you go ahead and log a ticket or something like that? All these guys.
Yeah, and before everybody starts sending me messages, we treat if you email us, that's going to go into our system, and we're going to try to get to it as soon as we can. And on Slack, it's not a guaranteed response. I mean,
Yep, absolutely.
I want to be part of the community, so I'm in there, and if I answer a question in general, because I have a few minutes or because it's something that I can, easily help, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be there available. So if you send me a direct message and it needs to be fixed now, I might be working on something else. Anybody else have any other questions?
I think this is going to go this direction, but just following up on the whole licensing thing, because I've done similar things, we've done some other things. When we launched something, we didn't have all the licenses ready to go, and we go back and we figure it out. We got a spreadsheet, it's all fun. Is there any mechanism or plans in the roadmap for Expression Engine to help maybe put a licensing column, like licensing good, or here's my licensing number, or something in the add-ons page, just informational, so those of us that are, unintentionally doing it, they're like, oh, yeah, I gotta go get my licenses for these places to say, this is this license for this site.
Sort of like as part of the add-on bio, maybe?
Yeah, you'd have to come up with some kind of unified way to do that, and all the add-on developers would have to get on board. It's not a bad idea, but there's a lot of water under the bridge with the way we've all constructed our add-ons. But I'd be open to something like that. Yeah, Ansel will let you know if you don't have a valid license. I'm probably the most aggressive on that of the add-ons that are out there, but because I allow a free 30-day download. And it after 30 days, if you don't have a valid license, it says, "Hey, probably need a license." So,
Where does it say that?
when you go to edit an entry with an Ansel field, there will be a red alert instead of the red alert. The red styled alert in Expression Engine where the field should be, and it'll say you need to go purchase a license or enter it. Yeah.
And we're guilty of that as well, because we develop sites and we've done the same thing where we're just trying to get the sites developed, and I've installed Ansel, and a few days later, all the images disappear and there's a licensing thing, and Tom's out of the office for whatever reason, and he's the one who purchases the license, so I gotta send a message to TJ and be like, can you really help me out? I'm so sorry.
Good problems to have in our community, actually, cares about each other.
One thing I've run into, you have to be really clear on your license. I had a client one time, and I got in there, I'm like, what are your licenses? And they're like, who's got one? I'm like, who's got 10 installs? Who's got a license? I'm like, you need 10 licenses.
Yeah, I think most people do the one license per site, but I mean, it's up to you guys. Because you have the multi-pack thing.
Yeah, so that's kind of going towards the licensing thing of trying to combat the people who are getting one copy of the add-on and installing it on 10 sites. we've got the Megapack at the set price, and there's people that have installed it on 100 sites, and that's awesome. And they've generated licenses for each one, and we're obviously losing money on people that have that volume. But then it also gives the people who want to use the majority of our add-ons and are probably maybe using them illegally on a bunch of sites, a little bit of a cover to use them kind of the way they want without having to worry so much about that. And it gives us a little bit more revenue to ensure that we don't have to go down the path of like really being restrictive with our licenses.
Can I ask a question about the Megapack?
No.
Thank you. Because you do have the ability to generate licenses per site. We generally don't do that. Like, we just use the main license on it. Would you prefer us to generate them? I guess my thought was, like, as long as they're with us, using the same license isn't a big deal. And if they wanted to move on, then we would generate it or something. But I'm just curious, like what you guys would prefer.
Ideally, individual licenses per site. We have a lot of work to do with our license management in general, being able to associate a license with a specific account. We often have licenses that get transferred. You guys are mostly dev shops, so you'll create a license for a client, and then you'll transfer it to that client if they're no longer your client or if they just want to have it under their own account. So we have to kind of break those off. So if you've got an account where you're just using a ton of licenses but not generating them individually, and you need to send it to your customer, there's a disconnect when they call us, a year later or whatever, and they're like, hey, I've got this license. And we're like, no, you don't. We can't verify that. So eventually, yeah, we're going to expand on that to make it easier to associate one. Because right now, if you go in, you have your list of licenses, and you don't have a list of which domains or which clients they go to. So we're going to kind of build that out a little bit further. But our focus has been getting the add-ons we acquired solid first, and everything else is kind of soon.
I was gonna maybe ask what your perspective is of the add-on community, since 3, let's say. And I guess, because my sense is, as a EE shop, I don't feel like I want 500 modules that aren't there. Like, I feel like there's like 3. I don't know what the thing is. I just mean, like, I feel like the void is maybe the small number. It's just more like when I'm selling, it's the perception thing of like, oh, there's a widget here that's not here. Like, I feel like that's when it faces more than an actual need or lack of something. Because like we built sites and we're using 3 modules for it. We're not. Like, what's your sense of what this module community or the add-on community needs?
Do you mean like voids and functionality? Like gaps? You mean gaps in functionality, or?
I mean, like, I don't know who the other active add-on builders are. Like, aren't they maybe all in this room?
I think we're probably some of the more active ones now since they acquired DevDemon. You guys got Pixel and Tonic. And Lowe's not here, yeah. In SoulSpace, yeah, and they're not here. I don't know, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Like, there are a lot of add-ons in E2. A lot of them to get ported to E3. For me personally, like, I don't build a ton of sites, but I'm sure there's some gaps, but I feel like in E2 there's maybe a bit of a money grab. So there are a lot of add-ons that I didn't think were very good at all, and things that are duplicating functionality. And for me, it's like, I'm fine with those not getting ported to 3. It's like, it probably makes the quality of the current add-ons better. Unfortunately, there are some gaps and some things that haven't been migrated yet, like the Maps add-on that everybody uses. I looked at the GitHub code for that, and I was like, could I port this to E3? And the way that's written is not an easy task. It's almost a tear down and rebuild. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah,
or is there anything else?
seems like you guys can't do a new module next month, right? You said you won't pursue a commercial. And so, like, who will do the next commercial module? I guess is like 4 people.
Well, hopefully new people. I mean, it's like, so, I mean, I haven't said I'm never going to do a new add-on, but like, I don't have any plans to do anything right now, just 'cause I don't see a gap in the capacity thing too. I mean, EE4 is coming around, so now we got port stuff to that too, so.
I think there is an opportunity for those of you who are looking to get into add-on development. I think because we did see a trimming of the add-on community from 2 to 3, I think. And I think there's a big opportunity. And I've maximized that as much as my capacity allows me to, as the only developer with Buzzing Pixel, and I would love to see more of you guys say, hey, there's an opportunity here. And I think we do have, going back to our earlier discussions, we have a great community that's pretty supportive. And we've honed that over the years. And I think it's a great opportunity for new add-on developers.
I actually have something. The other thing, at least at Vector, we've got a huge focus on open source contributions, and there's a number of add-on developers out there that are focused entirely on that and not making money off of add-ons. And one of the best examples is actually a coworker at Vector, Rob Sanchez, who's released, I think, 50 open source packages, to date at this point. So I think there's a lot of sort of hidden gems out there. And I would encourage, more add-on developers to come together and contribute towards making a lot of those really great.
Now you're making me think of devotee. Because like our art goes on one place. Is there one place to go? And we're kind of losing the one place. And I don't know, do we need one place to go from art? Even if it's open source?
Yeah, it's kind of a little harder to track down. Like if you don't know about Rob's GitHub account, then most of them are listed on GitHub or Devotee. Yeah. So you can get to GitHub from there.
Yeah, this is an interesting time for Expression Engine in general because, as Derek pointed out during the initial talk, this is the first year this conference is community-driven. The same thing is happening in the add-on ecosystem. It went from a very commercial enterprise to a community-driven one. I mean, there are a lot of add-ons that are no longer available on Devotee, but there are a lot that still are. There's a bunch that are on GitHub. So we're at the point now where we're kind of need to build the system to make all of this stuff accessible that's more community-driven than commercial-driven. Obviously, we're still going to sell add-ons. It's still going to be a commercial, enterprise from that standpoint, but just the availability and the ability for new people to come in and build add-ons has to be more about the community than it does about you have to pay X to even make this visible to people.
Follow up on the topic just brought up. Just a quick check. How many people are familiar with Lamplighter? Right, so we're building something in-house to take over the version checking and tracking. So we have one place to go. All our licenses are in one dashboard. All our versions we quickly define to see as far as our 50+ sites are managing. So we're building that in-house. Is there any place where there's going to be a unified way to find out the versions, current version, the way that Lamplighter tried to do it, it wasn't 100% successful, which is why I guess they did now.
Unfortunately, I really think that has to come from Ellis Lab, and they are really busy with doing really cool stuff, and I don't think that would be in 4. But I think that if that were going to happen, they would have to provide it so that it would be unified across all developers, because we all have our own things that we want to do. I provide a feed in my add-on. All my add-ons that have a control panel then have an update section, and it shows you the latest updates. And then somebody else is going to implement it differently, and somebody else is, the eHardware is going to implement it differently. And it really, if it's going to be unified, Ellis Lab is going to have to say, here's what you should provide, and then we'll display it in the control panel. I think that's what has to happen. I don't see it happening any other way.
And they would, the extension of that could be a dashboard for a developer or a dev house that has everything in one place, quickly can see alerts, so like, oh, we get this.
Right. I mean, even if we all had the same, like you got an RSS feed and JSON feed, and I have the same thing, but I think our formats vary just a little bit different.
Yeah.
So I mean, even if everybody can get on the same page with the exact same format, at least you can write an app or something that just curates everything. Well, yep.
And there have been these standards to some degree, but they've kind of come and gone, like the Newism one as well.
Yeah.
So nothing is really stuck long term.
Is that something that Ellis Lab would be willing to make a statement, here's the best practice? We all rally around.
I think you're right, it has to.
Not required, but.
Yeah, I did.
I mean, anything that we come up with as add-on developers that's separate from Ellis Lab has the same potential to become fractured and to become abandoned and stuff like that. So we could do kind of a unified thing amongst ourselves, but again, we don't want to take away from our contribution to the Ellis Lab community and what they're doing. So I think waiting for them, it's a little difficult now, but waiting until we can all kind of work together on it is going to be the best option.
It becomes an issue for us too, especially with that one-click updater now. Because,
Well, because you guys have mostly seen the one-click updater in 4, right? And of course, updating is always, add-ons is an issue. And we've definitely been talking that it'd be nice if we had some way to say, you could update, but this will blow up. Perhaps you should not. So yeah, we've had those discussions internally. We're aware.
In the back. So last night I touched a little bit with Jason about this, but sometimes I have edge cases where an add-on will do just about what I need, but I need a small tweak. How do you guys feel about knowing about those edge cases? For instance, if there is an added method into your add-on that helped fulfill that edge case, would you guys like to hear about those kinds of things, and how would you like them communicated?
Yes. No, any and all feedback's welcome, especially if you need a hook added to an add-on. In my case, I'm more than welcome to add a hook, so the add-on itself is extensible. I get feature requests every once in a while, and usually, sometimes it's like a really quick thing to change. Something if I get something that's more involved, I'll be just kind of weighing the pros and cons and like, is this advantageous to other people, or is this really, really specific to this one person? So I kind of just weigh that against the development time incurred.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, I'm always open to hearing what those edge cases are, because in my case, I'm just one developer, and I can only think of so many ways to do something. And if somebody's, what the worst that can happen is I can say, I don't really feel like that's a good fit with my software. But I have already had stuff that is in Ansel 2 now was because of requests and pings that I received about the features they'd like to see in Ansel 2 from Ansel 1. And so, yeah, I always want to hear the feedback for sure.
Another approach is actually to start wrapping some of the functionality around in services with the E3. So that's something that hasn't been done a lot yet, but I think it's something we could start to work towards. About services? Yeah. I touched on a little bit yesterday in my talk, but there's essentially a new way, new-ish with E3 to expose services from an add-on. So if you wanted to use the core functionality in a way that was maybe outside of the mod file methods, it's a little easier rather than necessarily have to go through a library. So that would be my recommended way of handling that.
I haven't used Drupal or Joomla or any of those, but Expression Engine makes it extremely easy for this specific use case. Because of the hook system, admittedly, there's a few undocumented hooks in some of our add-ons, specifically because we've had requests for custom functionality that we didn't have time to build or wasn't something that affected more users. So we were able to put a hook in at that location of the code, send it back to the customer, and then they were able to write their own code and fix it. And it was such a very low barrier of change for us that we're more than happy to do that. And it kind of exposes an area in our add-ons where it's like, okay, this needs to be maybe or could be more robust or built out. And you guys have the ability to then take that data and do whatever you want in your own extensions. And it doesn't have to make us like wait or work harder or include that specifically for something that doesn't apply to everybody else.
Just kind of tack onto that is, I think from a user perspective, it might be helpful to have like a feature request like Google form link, like maybe that I've been in a few cases where it would have been nice to easily submit feedback instead of going kind of through the loop of like a one-to-one communication just to fill out a form. I don't know, I just think that might be helpful.
Do you mean like a feedback form in the add-on?
Like a devotee page or something like that, or just like a link to like a Google form to get feedback, like for a feature request or something like that?
Okay. So in my case, like, I mean, I have a, say we, just me. So I mean, I have my support ticket form, and there's a feature request option. You can always just Twitter me or email support@boldminded.com. At least that's my, I'll handle it.
I would like for feature requests to come in through support tickets, so, yeah.
And oftentimes it's because tracking. We might not be able to get to it for a month or two. I mean, I'll respond and say, hey, I got this, really like the idea, but it's kind of lower priority kind of thing. And if it's in an email somewhere, it's probably going to get lost. So keeping it forefront in my log is the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, our experience has been that it's kind of hit or miss. Some people will be quiet and not tell us, and then they'll come up to us or they'll send us an email being like, oh yeah, I thought about this for a long time. I figured it was one of those things that everybody asked you for, and we're like, nobody's asked us, literally. And then you've got other people that'll send us like a dozen emails, Jason, asking for stuff. So those are pretty easy to kind of remember and to get to eventually.
So for you, I asked a question earlier. Oh, it sounds like you're just financing that. Obviously, the reality is like, oh, there's a need for this thing. Like, where do I? Like, it would take you guys 100 hours to write it. So like, if there's the project budget right there. But what about something like Kickstarter approach of like, well, I guess a two-pronged question. So say that happens, someone's commissioned to write the add-on. Who owns the add-on after that? I guess the second question is like Kickstarter, because I don't even know, like, you mentioning that was like the first thing you considered that. But like, would a Kickstarter thing like, work where it's like, hey, wouldn't you guys love a entrepreneur with this? And then like the community raises the money to make it, but then like it has to be supported.
Right. That's an interesting idea. Having the community raise funds for that. We are a pretty small community, but so we have to like kind of advertise that somehow.
My first question is, are we a big enough community to kickstart something like that? And I don't know what the answer to that question is.
I think we probably are. I think like there are times I think like there's probably hundreds of other sites that like need this little gap filled. I don't think everything's like cancel side or promotional side. I think there's like little things like that. I'm not saying this out of like I don't want to own an add-on, but like, and I don't care if it gets commissioned and like Bold-Minded built it and like it's revenue for you and all that stuff. I mean, like, I don't care about that. It's more like fitting the need of I need this month to do that thing. And then trying to think of creative ways to get this stuff.
Yeah, I think the crowdfunding would kind of go, how does that work into your actual schedule? So I mean, it takes time to get the funds crowdsourced. Is the project going to need to be done before you get the funds? So in that case, might as well just pay for the add-on development up front. It's going to cost you more, but you can just offload that to the client.
Yeah, I had an add-on. I actually sell it. It doesn't. I've sold like 2 copies in its entire existence. But it was commissioned for me to write it for a specific client. They paid me my full development weekly price, and then they didn't want to own it. They didn't want the ongoing maintenance, and so basically the contract was you own the add-on. If you sell it, you do the maintenance. If we want things that are beyond general maintenance, we will hire you to work on it some more. And so that sort of thing happens too. Again, it's all up to your contract.
Actually have a follow-up to that. In most cases at Vector, we actually will be commissioned to write an add-on, but it would be not like a community add-on. It would be specific to a client. So I think that happens a lot as well, especially with the agency model.
Yeah, we've done that actually quite a bit. We call it a sponsorship. So we have 2 different types of add-on development. We do custom development of an entire add-on for somebody, and they pay us, whatever the time is and the total add-on, and then they basically own it. But then we have sponsorship, which is the middle of the road between having to pay a ton of money, not a ton, but the full amount for a custom add-on, or having to wait until we roll a feature. There are features in Transcribe and Structure that customers have paid for in a sponsorship fashion. It gets them early access. It gets maybe things that are a little bit more specific, and it gets it to the community later at a reduced cost. So you guys don't have to pay a ton more for these features that we've added. The client doesn't have to pay a ton to have a specific thing rolled out for them, and it kind of benefits everybody, and it works in with our development schedule.
Continuing on that idea, and I might be a little off here because again, I'm not an add-on developer, and I don't have a whole lot of hands-on with the ongoing community conversation, but it sounds like there may be some add-ons that are sitting on the shelf that could be of value to the community, but there's that support aspect, so they're not commercial. What about add-on development that is done or may be done and then you crowdsource to open source? So enough of us come in and say, yeah, we'll give $50 for that, so then it becomes an open source thing so that we can have access to that goodness, knowing that it's an open source and the support is not necessarily guaranteed. Is that something that's been talked about or doing that?
I don't really have any add-ons sitting on the shelf, so I don't know if that applies to me.
Or new add-ons that get created, and, with a little bit of investment, but somebody might be able to see their investment come back.
Sure.
The single developer said, okay, yeah, I'll pay for it, but then I don't want to hold on to it because I'm not an add-on developer. I want to get it back out there. Recoup my investment.
So we have a lot of add-ons that quite honestly are like sitting on the shelf, like you're saying. The reality is a lot of it comes down to a business decision as well, right? Like at what point is it a wise move to release an additional 15 add-ons that, they're not going to be widely used necessarily, but then all of a sudden you kind of have an obligation to make sure you're continuing to update 3E versions as core functionality changes to keep it up to date. And by and large, maybe that's everything you sell 10 copies of over the course of the existence because it's kind of a shelved item, if you will, purposefully. So you got to look at the business end of it too. It's even if you crowdsource it, like you're saying, so then you have maybe a chunk of money that comes in up front and you get it out. But somebody still has to be on the hook for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Whatever the longevity of the add-on is.
Wouldn't that be community if it's open source?
It could be. I mean, somebody's got to take points still, right?
Open source does not necessarily mean that you're not supporting the add-on. Somebody has to curate that. Somebody has to respond to the issues. Like somebody has to be responsible for that. It's still a lot of responsibility. I tend to feel like it's not very responsible to put an open source thing out in the world and then not take care of it and just sort of let it go. So, I mean, even if somebody submits a pull request, you kind of have to, like, I don't know about anybody else. I don't just merge in pull requests without doing a code review,
I think we need Rob here because he probably has the most things out on GitHub.
Yeah, I can't even speak to his experience.
I mean, there's like you said, there's an obligation even if it's out there for free. I mean, something's going to get stale unless somebody's actively updating it. And people still, I had stuff out for free. People just expect it to be completely updated, and I've had people get a little testy with it, which is kind of surprising because it's like on GitHub it's free. It's like, I'm sorry it's a little out of date, but don't be mad at me.
I mean, one thing we can all do is to support each other's open source efforts a little better, and then that makes the efforts a little bit less. So, and I know people have come together around some of Rob's projects because they get used so much.
I've submitted pull requests for that stuff.
Right. So if you use an open source package and you see an issue, fix it, and then submit a pull request. And, don't wait for the original author to necessarily get time to do it. Very likely they have a day job.
Yeah, I think that just reminded me, Clinton might have left. Yeah, I have one pull request that Clinton sent me a few days ago that I just now remembered, so.
Yeah, and actually Structure has Rob Sanchez's Structure Nav. It's rolled into the core now. It was something that we did just because it made it so much easier, but we didn't change the price of it. We didn't commercialize that aspect of it, and Structure Nav is still available on GitHub for free if you wanted to do it outside of Structure. So our add-ons aren't open source per se, but we do, appreciate that aspect of it. And we have a number of, like Tom said, add-ons that are kind of on the shelf. But in addition to having to support them, if the functionality only helps a handful of people, or if it might be, we all have clients that want exactly what they want and want to modify an existing add-on that's available in the ecosystem, but it might conflict with something that's core to Expression Engine, or that just wouldn't be good for, to have out there in general use, or to maintain going forward, or uses some technology or paradigm that's just not sustainable or requires such a high level. So even though it works now and it could be open source, if it's something that would require constant maintenance, you just know it's going to decay too fast, and you're going to get just a ton of people that are using it that are unhappy.
So we're at technically time. So if you have like one more question, I'll try to wrap it up.
It's actually just a quick comment to this direction. One reason Apple owns the world at the moment is because they realize, make a development environment that is friendly and supports developers, creates a community, somewhat sandbox, but at the same time allows for creativity. I really hope that you guys see that as a shining part of your entire offering.
I will say LS Lab is amazing with helping us. If we are writing something and EE doesn't support it, we need a little tweak. They've been very open to doing things to help us.
I'm sure there were others, but I like to say Core Boot is the hook that was added because of me. So.
We probably added a hook for everyone. Oh, I will say one thing we, at least internally, kind of philosophy is we shoot for meeting at least 80% of the need. And we know you guys are there for the fringe stuff. It's critical.
One more question. Yeah, just real quick. I know TJ said he's not necessarily making more commercial add-ons. Do you guys have any add-ons you're working on right now that you want to share? Like anything little announcement that we can get excited about? Or?
No, not for me, no. No, I just saw some of the EE4 stuff yesterday, so my brain's already charting for stuff I need to do to get stuff updated for EE4. So new stuff is definitely pushed out.
I don't have any new add-ons in the works. I'm working on some updates to some. But I did just release Executive, and I don't know if everybody is aware of that yet. So since you asked, I will mention that Executive is out there in the world. It's free and open source. It already has a pull request, which I haven't had time to look at since it happened, since I've been here at the conference. But it is a command line interface into Expression Engine to do stuff and make migrations and various things. So get out there, look at it, and enjoy it. It's on my GitHub account.